Alright guys, this is Unit 7, Lesson 5A, and today we're going to work on factoring trinomials. So we factored by GCF, and then we factored difference of two squares, or what we call dots. Remember when this is a square minus another square. And he called that conjuncts, but typically, again, you're going to call this dots, difference of two squares. So factoring trinomials is really important. You're going to use this again throughout mathematics, so you really have to get this down. So let's go through this. First of all, to do the factoring trinomials, you really must understand your integer rules pretty well. So integer rules are dealing with negatives and positives. So you should know that if you look at these examples, when the numbers have the same sign, think of sum. It's pretty easy, same sign, sum. Add numbers with same sign and keep their sign. So you should easily know, obviously, 8 plus 7 is 15. But negative 6 plus negative 9 would be negative 15. So you add the numbers, keep the sign, because when you're at negative 6 and you get more negatives, you're just increasing the amount of negatives you have, negative 15. When they have different numbers here, you should know that means difference. You should know that negatives and positives cancel each other out. So that should be obviously that they're going to subtract. So you're going to subtract the numbers with different signs and keep the sign of the larger number. That's probably not mathematically the best thing to say, because technically negative 9 is not larger than 6, but I really mean the larger amount of the things. So hopefully you understand that. So obviously here, negative 5 plus 7, they have different signs, so I'd subtract, and there would be two positives. Think of this. There's 5 negatives would get rid of 5 positives, and positive 2 would be left. Here, 6 positives would get rid of 6 negatives, and there would be 3 negatives left. And again, that's what I mean, keep the sign of the larger amount. So 9 is a larger amount than 6. So that's stuff you should all know. And you also need to know your multiplying. So obviously you should know that a positive times a positive, or a negative times a negative, equals a positive. So when they have the same sign when you're multiplying, you should know they're positive. So therefore, this obviously is 40, and this is going to be 40. And if they have different signs, positive times a negative or a negative times a positive, you should know they come out negative. So obviously this would be negative 36, and this would be negative 36. And factoring really isn't that difficult. What happens is most students mess up on the signs because they don't think about things like positives and negatives enough. So that's really what affects this the most. All right, so to help you factor, first I want you to multiply these binomials. So you should be good at this by now, so please hit pause and do all 3 of these. And then when you're done, what I want you to do is look for some type of pattern between your answers in the original problem. So look at your answer and then look at the original problem. That's not what I want to do. There we go. And see if you see a pattern at all. So please do that now. All right, how did you do? So this first one, you should have multiplied and basically distributed and got something like that. Then you could have combined like terms, and finally, this is the answer you should have came up with. The second one, again, there's your distributing, showing the work, and then combine the middle terms and end up with that. And finally, this one here, hopefully you distributed everything correctly. Oh, that should say 15. That's a mistake, sorry. Or 16, you know what I meant. There we go. I think the one below it's probably messed up too. Nope, got that one right. All right, so what I wanted you to do is, do you see the pattern? Hopefully you did. And what I mean is these different colored numbers, that's why I made them different colored. How did this 8 and 15 come along? Well, it really came from these numbers. Hopefully you see that you end up adding the two middle numbers together, 3 and 5. And then when you multiply these numbers, it gets that one. And that's true all the way through. So I've done these so long, I don't do this step. I just instantly look at these and say, okay, I have to add these. That would be negative 7. I have to multiply those. That would be negative 8. And I instantly know the last one. Same thing here. Add these, negative 8. Multiply these, positive 16. So when you understand that, you don't have to do this middle step anymore. And really, once you do understand that, factoring will become really easy. Because what we're going to do is we're going to give you a trinomial like these, because there's 3 parts, 1, 2, 3. We're going to say factor this trinomial. And what you're going to do is try to get it back into this form. So what multiplies to get here? Well, you could see factoring trinomial is just the reverse of multiplying. So this trinomial came, here's the factors of that trinomial. So this trinomial, these are the factors of the trinomial. All right, so I have some really easy steps that you can follow when you're doing these problems. And if you follow this, it will become pretty easy. So when you're factoring trinomials, always check for a GCF first. These ones won't have it, but you should always check for that first, because you never know when they are. Factoring trinomials without a GCF is the reverse of multiplying binomials. You're just going to do the opposite. And here's the key, really simple, the step 3. I would like to put a little star here or something. This is it. Find the factors of the, all right, I messed that up. Find the factors of the third term that add or subtract to get to the second term, and that's it. So we're going to factor the third term, and we're going to find out which ones add or subtract to get to the second term. And your answer is going to look like the binomial. So you always have x plus or minus. That's what this symbol here means, plus or minus. Then you're going to have some numbers here, and they're basically going to be the factors we found up here. And this doesn't have to be x, whatever the variable of the polynomial is, so that could change to something else. All right, so let me show you how I do it. Now, if you follow my technique, it works pretty well and makes things really easy. So I always look at the third term. We have to factor that, meaning what numbers multiply to get to 12. So write it down, but you should write plus 12 because the positive here is important. So then I just come up with the factors of 12, pretty easy. You always start with 1 times 12, and I just go down the line. Does 2 go into 12? Yeah, 2 times 6. Then I try 3, 3 times 4. And once you're back on this side, you know you found them all. See, these are all the numbers that multiply to get to 12. Now, the positive 12 is important because if you remember our rules, in order to multiply and get a positive, the signs have to be the same, and I would end up adding the numbers. So this tells me I have to add these numbers now and get that middle term. So that's why I know to add them. And hopefully you see down here that if I make this a positive 3 plus a positive 4, that would equal 7. So these numbers multiply to get to 12 and add to get to 7. So they multiply to get here, they add to get to there. Once I know these are the numbers that are going to go in my parentheses, then I could just write out my factor. And you won't have to do this every time, but you could check it by just doing your distributing. So I do x times x. Gets x squared. X times 4. X times 3. And then multiply, and then you can see I can combine the middle. So when I re-multiply this, I come back with the original polynomial. So these are the answers. That's the factors of our polynomial right there. So I'll do it a couple more times, and I think you'll get it down. So remember, always look at that third term because that's what we multiply to get to that. So I write it down and its sign. That's very important. So I'm going to add now and try to get the middle term. Let's get our factors of 18 is always 1 times the number, 2 times 9, 3 times 6. Let's see, 4 doesn't work, 5 doesn't work, and 6 is already represented, so I know I found them all. And I want to add to get to 11, but not just 11, I need to get negative 11. So how do I add these numbers but get negative 11? Well, remember that the signs could be the same and still get positive 18. So if I simply make this negative 2 minus 9, you should know that makes negative 11. And if you think what is negative 2 times negative 9, that would get the positive 18. So that's when you really have to stop and think about the signs, so be careful. So it's really easy to check your work when you're done. So I'm telling you, most students are really good at finding the numbers, but they mess up the signs. If I made both of these positive, it would add to get positive 11, not negative 11. And then you could easily test it out. And you don't have to do the whole multiplying. Just say, hey, if I add these, what's negative 2 plus negative 9? That's negative 11. And what's negative 2 times negative 9? That's positive 18. I know I got the right factors. So just double check your work and you'll see it's not so bad. All right, so now look, it's a negative 12. So again, writing this negative down, I can't stress this enough, is really important. Because to multiply to get to negative, one has to be a positive, one has to be a negative, which means you're subtracting. So this minus sign says now I have to subtract the factors. So we already know the factors of 12. We already wrote them down. But I'm subtracting, and I have to get this number. And you should know that if there's no number in front of a variable, then you know that's 1. So I have to subtract in order to get 1. So you could just subtract them like this if you wanted, and you could see that 3 minus 4 would get negative 1, and I want positive 1. So now this is what I mean by slow down and think about this, and just switch the signs. It's that simple. If I make this negative 3 plus 4, that would get positive 1, and that's what I want for the middle. So focusing on the signs is really important. I'm telling you, people are going to mess these up because they're not going to pay attention. So now I can fill this in. And again, you could check it simply. -3 plus 4 is +1, and -3 times 4 is -12. All right, hopefully this is going okay for you. Last example, and then I'll let you try some of your own. So again, look at the third term. I'm going to write down the -24. Now factors of 24, 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8, 4 times 6, 5 doesn't work, 6 is already there, so I'm good. I'm subtracting, and I want to get -5. So you could just do this and do it in your... But now I can see that this one, now this would be a +3 minus 8 gets -5. If I switched it and did something like -3 plus 8, that would get +5, and I want a -5. So you really have to pay attention to those. Now here's my factors, +3 minus 8. So now I know I just have to do an x and an x. And I put this one in here, +3 minus 8. That's it. Then I can check it and it will all work out. All right, so hopefully that went okay for you. So now it's time for you to practice. So do all 4 of these, try your best, and only hit play once you have answers. All right, how did you do? Let's go through these. I won't explain it all. You could just look, write things down, but here's the factors you should have got. And again, you should do this work that I'm doing. It really does make things easier for you. So when you were done, you should end up with x plus 2, x plus 4. Started with the easy one, hopefully. Number 2, hopefully you wrote down your factors of 30. And we're trying to get +7. So this right here makes +7. So your answer would be y minus 3, y plus 10. And notice these are y's, so make sure you have y's, not x's. All right. Number 3, and I'm kind of a nerd, but I actually like this. I find it fun it's like figuring it out, being a little detective here. So now we're looking for a -1, and it's a -20, so I know I had to subtract. +4, -5 gets -1, and there's my factors. And finally, the last one, +15. Don't have a lot of factors, so that's pretty easy. I'm trying to get 8, and remember, same sign means I'm adding, but I'm adding to get to a negative, so it better be -3 plus -5. And there it is. I knew it was somewhere. All right, so hopefully that went okay. We'll definitely practice these in class, and you got to get this factoring down.